Throughout history, when the choice came down to survival or death, humans have done things that are almost impossible to imagine today. Not out of cruelty, out of pure, desperate necessity. Here are some of the darkest survival methods ever recorded. In the Arctic regions of North America and Siberia, temperatures could drop below -40 degrees, cold enough to kill an exposed human within minutes. Indigenous hunters in some of these regions developed an extreme emergency technique. If caught far from shelter during a sudden storm, they would gut a freshly killed large animal, remove the internal organs, and climb inside the carcass itself, using the animal's own body as insulation until the storm passed. It sounds horrifying, but the thick hide and remaining body heat could mean the difference between freezing to death within the hour and surviving until rescue or better weather arrived. In the winter of 1846, a group of American pioneers known as the Donner Party became trapped by early, heavy snowfall while attempting to cross the Sierra Nevada mountains on their way to California. Supplies ran out within weeks. Temperatures stayed brutally low for months. Of the roughly 87 people in the group, nearly half died from starvation and exposure before rescue parties could reach them in the spring. Some survivors later admitted, and evidence at the campsite confirmed, that in the most extreme final weeks, some members of the party resorted to eating the flesh of those who had already died, a desperate last measure to keep the remaining survivors alive long enough for help to arrive. In several documented survival situations, from stranded sailors to soldiers isolated behind enemy lines, drinking the blood of freshly killed animals has been recorded as an emergency source of both hydration and nutrients when clean water and food were unavailable. Some Arctic and desert indigenous groups historically used this technique deliberately as part of their survival knowledge, understanding that animal blood contains usable nutrients and fluid the human body can process in short-term emergencies, even though it's far from ideal nutritionally over any longer period. In treeless environments from the American prairies to parts of the Arctic and Central Asia, wood for fires was often simply unavailable for hundreds of miles in any direction. Pioneers crossing the American plains in the 1800s and nomadic groups in Mongolia and the Arctic for centuries before them relied on a resource that was always available, dried animal dung, and in the most desperate emergency situations, on other burnable waste. Properly dried, it burns hot enough to cook food and provide warmth and remains a practical fuel source in some remote regions even today. Long before modern medicine understood how the human skull and brain actually worked, some ancient cultures practiced trepanation, deliberately drilling or scraping a hole into a living person's skull. Archaeological evidence shows this was sometimes used as an emergency survival treatment, an attempt to relieve pressure after a serious head injury, in the belief it could release trapped fluid, evil spirits, or built-up pressure inside the skull. Remarkably, skull evidence from multiple ancient sites shows bone regrowth around some trepanation holes, meaning a number of patients didn't just survive the procedure itself, but lived for years afterward. None of these methods existed because anyone wanted to use them. They existed because, in the exact moment they were needed, they were often the only option left between a person and death. Modern survival experts still study techniques like these today, not to recommend them casually, but because understanding the true limits of human survival and what the human body and mind are actually capable of enduring remains one of the most valuable things we can learn from the darkest chapters of our own history. The people who lived through these moments weren't extraordinary because they wanted extreme situations. They were ordinary people who simply refused to stop trying to survive.